The leash slackened. Max, her fiercely loyal German shepherd, had stopped cold. His dark sable ears perked, his paws frozen in mud. Jenna tugged, confused. The path was empty, familiar, but Max refused to move. Then she saw it. Just beyond the overgrown trailhead, nestled in damp leaves, were tiny, muddy paw prints leading off-path. A half-buried collar jutted from the underbrush like a forgotten nameplate. Max whined, low, urgent. Jenna crouched, her breath caught in her throat. A sound broke through the stillness. Faint, fragile, crying. Something was alive beneath the silence, and Max had heard it long before she did. What Jenna found next would turn an ordinary walk into a race to save lives, and reveal just how much her dog had been trying to tell her all along. What was buried beneath the brush? Like, share, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. We'd love to know. The leash slackened without warning. Jenna paused mid-stride, the rhythm of her morning walk interrupted by sudden resistance. Max, her German shepherd, stood completely still. His ears twitched, his nose tilted upward, quivering. Dark sable fur shimmered slightly in the early morning sun as he leaned forward without moving his feet, his body locked with a tension Jenna recognized but couldn't yet explain. She gave a gentle tug on the leash. Max? No response. He wasn't looking at her. His gaze pierced the overgrown trailhead to their left, where weeds tangled in briars and the land sloped downward into thick brush. The air was humid, still. Late summer bugs buzzed lazily around Jenna's arms as she adjusted her grip on the leash again. Still, Max didn't move. This wasn't stubbornness. She'd seen that in dogs before, stalling for squirrels, refusing to leave the park. But Max was different, loyal to a fault, intuitive almost to the point of discomfort. He was the kind of dog who knew when her migraine was coming before she did, who refused to leave her side the night her sister called with bad news, who sat outside her bathroom door every morning as if he needed to be sure she came out. Now, he planted himself like a sentinel on this empty suburban trail. Jenna followed his line of sight. It was just under the edge of the brush, no more than a few yards away. She squinted. The sunlight was patchy, flickering through the branches above. And then she saw them. Muddy paw prints, tiny, uneven, leading off the trail and vanishing into the dark tangle beyond. Jenna stepped closer, her hiking boots sinking slightly into damp earth. The prints weren't Max's, too small, too shallow. These belonged to something else. Several, in fact. A cluster of prints, close together, circling. Her eyes tracked the arc of motion, where the trail curved past a small rise in the ground, and that's where she spotted it. A collar, half buried, faded red, with frayed edges and a rusted buckle. It looked like it had been there for days, maybe weeks. No tags, just a shape in the dirt that didn't belong. Max let out a low whine. Jenna crouched, her breath catching as the collar came fully into view. It had been intentionally covered with leaves, not forgotten, hidden. Her pulse quickened. The forest around her seemed to hush. Then she heard it, a sound so faint it might have been wind. But it wasn't. It was higher, fragile, a cry. Jenna turned, following the noise. It came again, clearer this time. Definitely crying, not human, not bird, puppies, tiny, desperate cries barely reaching the surface of the trail. Max tensed beside her, tail rigid, his eyes locked on a thick patch of vines to the left of the half-buried collar. Jenna pushed forward, brushing aside ferns and thorns, wincing as they snagged her sleeves. The path was soft here, sunken, a forgotten ditch from old drainage work. She knelt at the edge, brushing the dirt aside with one hand, eyes scanning every inch. The crying stopped. She froze. Max pressed beside her, sniffing hard, ears twitching in every direction. Then, a faint shuffle. Jenna's fingers touched something soft. Fur. Damp fur. She parted the brush, heart hammering in her chest. A pair of wide, blinking eyes stared back. A puppy, barely weaned, mud-caked and trembling. And behind him, another, and another, 4 in total, curled into a depression in the earth, as if someone had dug a shallow hole and left them there. Jenna recoiled, not from disgust, but from the sharp sting of realization. This wasn't an accident. Someone had left them. She reached for her phone. No signal, typical for this trail's lower loop. She bit her lip, glanced at Max, who stood like a statue beside her, eyes locked on the puppies. It was as if he'd known all along. She exhaled slowly and looked again at the tiny bodies huddled together. Their eyes were open, barely. Their sides moved with rapid, uneven breaths. None of them barked. None of them moved toward her. Survival had already drained their trust. Jenna removed her backpack and pulled out an old sweatshirt. She laid it flat beside the nest and gently scooped the first pup into its folds. He whimpered softly, his ribs far too prominent. A rustle behind her made her jump. Max turned sharply, growling low. Jenna froze, spinning toward the sound. Twigs cracked. From behind a screen of brush, something shifted. And then, movement. Not an animal. Someone was watching her. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. She didn't move. Not yet. Her hands stayed wrapped around the swaddled puppy in her lap, who whimpered once, then went silent again. The others lay motionless in the nest of leaves, too weak or too frightened to respond. Max took a single step forward, placing himself between Jenna and the direction of the sound. His growl, low and steady, rumbled through the quiet. A figure shifted again beyond the trees. Shadow, motion, then stillness. Jenna scanned the underbrush, trying to separate shapes from imagination. Nothing about this felt right. Whoever or whatever was watching wasn't making their presence known. They were waiting. She stood slowly, cradling the puppy against her chest. "Max, stay close," she whispered. The air felt heavier now. The forest no longer whispered. It listened. Jenna stepped backward, trying to shield the remaining puppies with her body as she assessed the distance to the main trail. Maybe 40 feet. Close, but not close enough. She could bolt, but she couldn't leave them. Her eyes dropped again to the tiny lives curled in the dirt. Every instinct screamed to get help, but every second away was a risk. These pups had been barely holding on, malnourished, exposed. Who knew what they had endured overnight? Max didn't move. His entire body pointed like a compass toward the watcher. Then, suddenly, nothing. The tension broke. A gust of wind moved the leaves. The shape vanished. Gone. Jenna blinked, unsure if it had been real. She glanced at Max. He relaxed, but only slightly. His ears twitched, still alert. She moved quickly now, kneeling beside the puppies again and placing the first one gently back in the sweatshirt. She gathered them all in one motion, 2 in the crook of each arm, swaddled like fragile bundles. Their warmth was barely noticeable. Max fell in beside her as she began walking, keeping her pace brisk and deliberate. The forest seemed to peel back as they moved, branches reaching less aggressively, path widening. Sunlight broke through in spears. At the trail junction, her phone lit up. Signal: 1 bar. Enough? She dialed fast. First instinct. The vet clinic. Her supervisor picked up on the second ring. "Sharon, it's Jenna. I need help. I found a litter. 4 puppies. Dumped. They're alive, but barely. I'm on the South Trail, lower loop, near the old fence line." Sharon didn't ask questions. "Text me a pin? I'll get the rescue team out now." Jenna sent her location and slid the phone into her pocket. Now came the waiting. She moved off the trail to a small clearing and laid her sweatshirt down in the grass, folding the sides to make a soft cradle. The puppies didn't cry. That worried her. Silence meant exhaustion, sometimes worse. Max circled once, then lay beside them, placing his head close, but not touching. He understood. He always did. Jenna knelt, fingers trembling as she checked each pup. Hydration, responsiveness, breathing rate. One was weaker than the others, smaller. His ribs pressed against her fingertips like wire beneath a tarp. Oh, tear welled in her eye before she even noticed. She wiped it away. Then her fingers brushed something under the fur of the smallest pup. A raw patch. No, a scar. No recent injury. This was older, healing unevenly. Bite marks. Her jaw clenched. She scanned the collar again, the half-buried one, now lying next to her. The stitching had initials. Faded, P.W. She stared at them. It wasn't a store collar. This had been handmade. Someone knew these puppies. Someone had marked them, and then left them here. This wasn't neglect. It was abandonment, with intent. The wind picked up again, rustling through the leaves. Max's ears twitched. He sat upright, nose sniffing toward the trail behind them. Jenna turned. A figure was coming. Fast, heavy footsteps crunching gravel. She rose to her feet, and then she saw the red vest. The logo. Rescue team. Relief flooded her limbs, making her knees weak. Sharon stepped into view, followed by two techs with crates and warm towels, but Jenna didn't move right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the trees beyond the rescue team, where the shadow had once stood. Her heart hadn't slowed. Her instincts hadn't settled, because something in her gut told her whoever left those puppies might still be watching. Jenna's fingers lingered on the collar long after the rescue team had gathered the puppies. The worn fabric was damp, its rusted buckles stained with soil. It shouldn't have been buried, not by accident. Someone had tried to erase it, marking the end of something they no longer wanted to see. P.W. The initials stitched into the lining itched at the edge of her mind. They weren't random, not a manufacturer's tag, not a fluke. A human hand had made those letters, someone who once cared enough to give identity. Then walked away. Max stood close by, his flank brushing against her leg. He had refused to relax, even after the puppies were tucked into crates lined with warm towels, even after the techs whispered to each other about dehydration and worm infestations and dangerously low glucose levels. He watched the tree line like it owed him answers. Sharon approached, kneeling beside the nearest crate. "They're lucky you found them when you did," she murmured. "Another day, maybe less." Jenna didn't look up. Her voice came quietly. "Max found them. Not me," Sharon nodded slowly. "He always knows." They both fell silent. The clearing smelled of crushed grass and antiseptic now. The vet techs moved efficiently, loading the crates into the van. But the silence between Jenna and Sharon felt dense, unsaid questions folding between them. "Did you see anyone?" Sharon finally asked. Jenna hesitated. "I thought I did. In the trees. Just for a second." Sharon glanced toward the woods, her expression unreadable. Probably just another hiker. Maybe. Jenna didn't believe it. And Max certainly didn't. As the team packed up, Jenna stayed behind for a moment longer. She turned the collar over in her hand again and took a photo of it with her phone. Something told her this wasn't over. These puppies weren't dumped randomly. There was a story buried here, just like that collar. And no one was talking. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her jeans, and called Max to her side. He came immediately, still scanning the forest edge. As they walked back toward the trailhead, the sun slipped behind the trees, pulling shadows across the path. The vet clinic's quarantine ward was quiet when Jenna arrived. Sharon had set the puppies up in an isolated room with soft heat lamps and padded cages. Jenna slipped on gloves and sanitized, then stepped inside. The smallest pup, the one with the scar, lay curled tightly in the back corner of his crate. He didn't lift his head when she entered. Jenna crouched in front of him, careful not to push too fast. She whispered, "You stayed quiet too long, didn't you?" No response, but his eyes opened, barely. He was watching her. She reached slowly for the clipboard hanging outside the enclosure. The intake form listed their approximate ages. 4 weeks. All underweight. One severely hypothermic on arrival. The scarred one was marked Pup Number 4. Jenna scowled and scratched it out, replacing it with a name, Shadow. She moved to the next crate. 2 of the other puppies were siblings by appearance. Black and brown coats, nearly identical markings. Shy but responsive. They had already eaten from shallow bowls of soaked kibble. The 4th was in better shape, stronger, more vocal. Probably the one who cried loud enough for Max to hear. He was the reason they were alive at all. Names give them a chance. Sharon had once told her. Jenna named the stronger one Echo. The twins became Ash and Ember. And Shadow, the smallest, remained still, silent, watching. That night, after everyone had gone, Jenna sat beside the quarantine room long after her shift had ended. Max lay at her feet, eyes half-lidded but alert. Jenna scrolled through her phone, studying the image of the collar again. Buddy bow, red nylon. Handmade stitching. On a hunch, she searched local dog breeders. Nothing. Then shelters. Still nothing. Finally, a community forum from a nearby town. Old listings, rescue alerts, missing animal posts, and then one thread caught her eye. A photo, 4 months old. A litter of German Shepherd mix puppies. 5 total. Advertised under the name Pine Willow Kennels. Her blood ran cold. P.W. The ad was gone. But the image had been saved in the forum post. And the dogs in the picture? They matched. Same markings, same size, even the same 2 wide eyes she had seen in the nest today. She opened the comment thread. Dozens of angry replies, accusations of backyard breeding, complaints about sick puppies, reports of bounced calls and false addresses. Someone named the breeder, Ty West. But he had disappeared. Phone disconnected. Website gone. She leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. Max stirred at her feet. So this wasn't just abandonment. This was deliberate. Someone had bred these puppies, sold a few maybe, and when the rest became a burden, dumped them in the woods like trash. Jenna looked through the glass wall at Shadow, still curled tightly in his cage. No one had come looking for them. No one had reported them missing, because the people responsible didn't want to be found. But Max had found them anyway. And now Jenna wasn't going to let them disappear again. The next morning, Jenna arrived at the clinic before sunrise. The building was still locked, dark except for the soft hum of the quarantine ward's heat lamps. She entered quietly, disarming the alarm with practiced fingers, and stepped into the back hall, where the air already smelled of warm kibble and disinfectant. Shadow was awake. He didn't make a sound, but when she approached his cage, his eyes met hers with something closer to recognition. Not trust, not yet. But not fear either. Max padded behind her, tail low, body relaxed. He had insisted on coming, restless since dawn, pawing at the front door. Jenna didn't argue. He had started this rescue. He had the right to see it through. The other puppies stirred slowly, their tiny bodies stretching beneath towels and blankets. Ember yawned. Echo licked his paw. Ash lifted her head and let it fall again. They were alive. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Because somewhere out there was a man named Ty West. and Jenna hadn't stopped thinking about him since last night. She pulled up the archived forum post again. The original link was dead, but a commenter had left a screenshot of a Venmo payment, a deposit for a puppy, labeled Pine Willow K9. The user's name was cryptic. T-2-T-T-T-W Ridge. That was enough. Jenna's phone buzzed. Sharon. You in early? Couldn't sleep, Jenna replied. They made it through the night. All four? Still here. Shadows stronger. Sharon paused. You're thinking about tracking him down, aren't you? Jenna didn't answer. She didn't need to. Just be careful, Sharon said, her voice lower now. Guys like that, they don't walk away clean. The line went dead. Jenna stood still for a moment, phone in hand. Then she turned to Max, who sat beside Shadow's cage like a quiet sentinel. He left them to die, she whispered, and he thinks no one cares enough to find out why. Max blinked slowly. Later that morning, Jenna drove, not to work, not to her apartment, but toward a name she'd circled twice in her notebook. Ridge Hollow. It was barely a town, more a scattering of trailers and aging farmhouses just past county lines. But it matched what she had found online. Ty West's old breeder registry had been flagged for that zip code before it vanished. She parked on a gravel pull-off and left Max in the car. Windows cracked, engine running. Her phone had no signal again. Ahead was a chain-link fence. Beyond it, a run-down single-wide trailer and what used to be a kennel. Empty cages, rusting, a shed with the door half open. No signs of life, but there were signs of something else. Trash bags, stacks of newspapers, bite-sized kibble bags, half-torn, scattered like someone had left in a hurry. And near the edge of the fence, paw prints. Jenna stepped forward, her boots crunching gravel. The smell hit her halfway up the drive. Old waste, damp hay, sour, sweet rot. She pulled her hoodie tighter and scanned the shed. Inside, crates, chewed blankets, one torn leash, still looped around a bent nail in the wall, and in the dirt near the back, a faded plastic tag. Ember. Her breath caught. Not the dog, the name. Written in permanent marker on a broken food bowl. These weren't just puppies. They had names once, real ones, before they were buried beneath neglect. Jenna turned sharply at a sound, footsteps, but it was Max, now beside her, silent. She hadn't heard him leave the car, but she wasn't surprised he had come. Then a new sound, behind the trailer. A creak. Jenna and Max both turned. Someone was there. She stepped cautiously, Max at her side. As they rounded the trailer, her stomach twisted. A figure stood near a small burn barrel. Back turned. Hoodie. Faded jeans. A phone in one hand. Jenna froze. The figure turned slightly, just enough for her to catch a glimpse of the side of his face. Young, maybe 30, tired, pale. Then he saw her, and bolted. Jenna shouted, running after him, but Max was faster. He surged ahead, not to attack, but to cut him off. The man skidded to a stop, hands raised. I didn't mean to, he started. Jenna didn't yell. Her voice was cold even. You left them. The man's face twitched. I tried to feed them. They weren't selling. The mom, she got sick. I couldn't. You buried a collar, she snapped. You didn't report them. You dumped 4 living puppies in the woods and walked away. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Max stepped between them again, not growling, just present. Jenna's voice softened, but it cut deeper. They had names. One still had a scar from something. One almost didn't make it. He looked down. I didn't know what else to do. Then you don't deserve dogs. For a moment, no one moved. Then Jenna turned and walked away. Max followed. She didn't call the police. Not yet, but she would. She would file a report. She would submit everything. Photos, coordinates, the names, and she would make sure no one let Ty West forget what he did. Because someone had to carry the weight, and someone already had. She looked at Max. He had stopped. He was staring down at the dirt beside the trailer. Muddy paw prints. Fresh. One set smaller than the rest. Jenna crouched. A fifth puppy? She looked at Max. His ears were forward, body rigid. They weren't done. Not yet. Max stood like a statue, nose to the wind, paws braced against the dry earth. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared into the thicket beyond the trailer with the kind of stillness Jenna had come to understand. There was something out there. She rose slowly, her eyes scanning the tangled undergrowth behind the rusting kennels. The muddy paw prints led straight through the fence line, narrow gaps in the chain where wire had rusted and snapped. A tight squeeze, too small for Max, not for a puppy. Jenna dropped to her knees and peered inside. It was dark. Thorny vines ran wild across the ground, and at first all she saw were shadows. Then a flicker of motion. A pair of ears twitched in the underbrush, low to the ground, barely visible but unmistakable. Another puppy. Jenna's breath hitched. The fifth, smaller than the others, his coat matted, almost gray from dirt. One paw raised as if frozen mid-step. He didn't make a sound. Max leaned forward, whined low. The pup didn't move, Jenna whispered. He's scared. He's waiting for someone he knows. She knelt beside Max, laid a hand gently on his back. It's okay, go. Max didn't hesitate. He slipped through the broken fence with care, crouched low, and moved forward one step at a time. No barking, no commands, just presence. The puppy didn't run. He watched Max approach, trembling, but not fleeing. It took only a moment. Max lowered himself fully onto his belly, silent, patient. And then, finally, the puppy moved. One step, then another, until he reached Max's nose and leaned in, pressing against him like he had been waiting for this exact moment to let go. Jenna felt her throat tighten. This was what Max had been searching for. The one who hadn't cried. The one too scared to make noise. The one he hadn't forgotten. Together, they returned through the fence. Jenna wrapped the pup in her jacket, his body shivering against her chest. He was light, far too light, but alive. That night, Jenna stayed at the clinic long past closing again. The fifth puppy, now named Whisper, was placed in his own padded crate beside his siblings. Shadow lifted his head when Jenna entered the room, and for the first time let out the smallest sound. A soft, broken bark. A response. Jenna sat on the floor, back against the wall. Max curled beside her. She thought about the woods, the rusting cages, the burn barrel, the silence that covered everything until it cracked open beneath Max's feet. People like Ty West disappeared all the time, changing names, closing doors, leaving damage in their wake. But this time, there were names, records, witnesses. This time, they had a story with breath and scars and muddy paw prints that refused to fade. Shadow, ember, ash, echo, Whisper, and Max, the dog who never stopped, listening as the heat lamps buzzed softly above and the puppies slept in a tangle of soft fur and rising chests. Jenna whispered into the room, not expecting an answer. You brought them all home. Max shifted in his sleep. His tail thumped once against the tile. Somewhere, deep in the quiet, something had healed. If this rescue moved you, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Subscribe for more real stories where dogs become the heroes we never knew we needed. And tell us, have you ever known a dog who refused to give up?